to cut spending. Indiana Congressman Mike Pence is the Republican conference chairman, the number 3 leader in the House of Representatives. Congressman, thank you for joining us. I want you to listen to your colleagues, Congressman Pete Sessions and Senator John Cornyn. They were with David Gregory on Meet the Press yesterday. Let's listen to what they said.
What painful choices are Republicans prepared to make? Are they going to campaign on repealing health care, for instance, repealing financial regulation? Would you just like to see those 2 things done?
Well, first of all, let's go right to it. We're going to balance the budget.
How do you do it? Tell me how you do it. Name a painful choice that Republicans are prepared to say we have to make.
Well, first of all, we need to make sure that as we look at all that we are spending in Washington, D.C., with not only the entitlement spending, but also the bigger government we cannot afford anymore. We have to empower the free enterprise system. See, this is where...
Congressman, these are not specific.
We need to go back to the exact same agenda that is empowering the free enterprise system rather than diminishing.
Senator, I'm sorry, I'm not hearing an answer here on specific what painful choices to really deal with the deficit. Is Social Security on the table?
Well, the president has a debt commission that reports December the 1st. My hope is they'll come back with a bipartisan solution to the debt and particularly entitlement reform, as you mentioned. But
wait a minute. Conservatives need a Democratic president's debt commission to figure out what it is they'd want to cut?
I say we need to do this on a bipartisan basis.
Well, Congressman Pence, I'd like to follow up on that. What are the Republican plans? You have a good shot at taking back the House of Representatives. Do you have an agenda for balancing the budget?
We sure do. Different than Democrats in Congress this year. Republicans passed a budget last year that actually would reduce deficits by $5 trillion over 10 years and reduce federal spending by $3 trillion. That was in the budget that we passed. We had a stimulus alternative that cost half as much as the president's, and according to their economic analysis, it would have created twice as many jobs. We had alternatives on health care, alternatives on energy, and as we go forward with the solutions that we've been offering, Chris, those are going to be a big part of the conversation we have with the American people going forward.
Well, the big problem is, as you know and I know, Congressman, and nobody wants to say what they want to cut. It's always Alphonse and Gaston. You tell me. The Republican Party I grew up with was the party of fiscal responsibility. So it seems to me your party could take the lead here and say what you want to cut. Do you want to cut in the entitlements? Where? Medicare, Social Security? Where in the discretionary domestic spending? Where in defense? Where in foreign aid? Give me about 3 or 4, even 1 or 2 big chunk ways to reduce a $1.6 trillion deficit.
Well, right. That's a $1.6 trillion this year. It's the second year in a row that deficits have been over $1 trillion. Some of that, I admit, was inherited by the economic and the bailout policies of the last administration. But look, again, Republicans went on the record last year. We committed to a 10-year budget that had $5 trillion less in deficits, $3 trillion less in spending. For my part, I've co-authored with Jeb Hensarling of Texas a spending limit amendment to the Constitution. You know, getting spending under control begins with electing a party that wants to get spending under control. Since the Democrats took control of the Congress, Chris, there's been an 84% increase in non-defense discretionary spending. Now, the president wants to freeze it at that level, but that's freezing it at an 84% increase. We need to set goals. They need to be serious goals, and then we need to be prepared to do the hard work on everything in this budget through fiscal restraint and reform to bring our federal budget within its means and within the means of the American people.
I sympathize with you, Congressman, but you're the party of fiscal responsibility. The people watching and listening right now on radio or in television or listening now, where do you want to cut the federal budget? Give me some programs you want to cut.
Well, look, I mean, in the category of discretionary spending, I personally have associated myself with hundreds of billions of dollars of wasteful government programs, you know, whether it be defense spending, intelligence spending, all of the security issues, or whether it be traditional discretionary spending, or whether it be entitlement reform. Republicans have really a long record of proposals that we've embraced over the years that we're prepared to move on. But again, I think it all really begins with electing a majority in Congress that wants to get federal spending under control. This president and this Congress have us on a pathway for $1 trillion deficits as far as the eye can see. And the American people have had it, Chris. They feel like Washington is out of touch. They're not making the hard decisions. And as I said, Republicans committed to a budget last year that would put $5 trillion less on the deficit, $3 trillion less in spending, and we're willing and ready, if awarded with the ability to lead this Congress again, we're ready to go to work on that and put the American people's money where our mouth is.
But you know, that cartoon, you know, we grew up with Popeye, and there was the character in Popeye named Wimpy, and he'd always say, I'll gladly pay you on Tuesday for a hamburger today. You're asking for control of Congress today on the promissory note that you will come up with actual program cuts. Now, I keep throwing out, the biggest cause of the deficit. You're more well-read on this than I am. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. You put all the federal receipts we come in taxes, and they all could just be going right there, exhausted in those three programs. We got defense systems you could name, but nobody wants to name what they want to cut by name, do they? Isn't that fair to say on both parties?
Well, it may be fair towards some members of Congress, but again, I hasten to add, Republicans, and it is astonishing to me the Democrat majority did not even try to pass a budget this year, but last year Republicans adopted a budget that had $3 trillion in spending cuts in it, and that would be cuts in discretionary spending, and it also would be cuts through reforms of entitlements. I think, you know, it's all going on the table. I understand the politics of saying, we'll name this, name that program, but I can tell you, take a look at that Republican budget last year. Republicans have been on the record about rolling back this runaway freight trade of spending that frankly began under the last Republican administration, has been put on steroids under this one. The American people want to get federal spending under control, and as our budget shows, we're ready to do it.
That's a good headline. The Democrats are Republicans on steroids when it comes to spending. I know, but the problem is funding the cuts. Let me ask you about this extension of unemployments right now. Yep. The president's pushing for it. Your party says he's not willing to pay for it. What is going to happen to those unemployed people? What should happen to them?
Well, what should happen to them?
They're not going to get benefits.
Well, no. What should happen to them is we should extend unemployment benefits, but we ought to pay for it, Chris. I mean, Republicans offered an alternative. The stimulus bill. Our alternative said you take $34 billion in unspent stimulus funds. I mean, the American people know the stimulus bill has utterly failed, so why don't we take $34 billion out of the stimulus funds that hasn't been spent and use that to pay to help Americans who are the victims of the failed policies of this and, frankly, the previous administration. I mean, this economy is struggling. The American people want us to get this economy moving again, but we need to help people at the point of the need. We just got to pay for it. I mean, when I'm home, people are saying, for heaven's sakes, we've got to see job creation. We've got to have economic policies that work, but we've also got to get spending under control. We can do that. Take the unspent stimulus funds, $34 billion, provide that in unemployment benefits to Americans that are hurting, and then let's try some new economic policies that will release the inherent power of this economy.
Right now, it looks to me like we all look at this big Niagara Falls coming at the end of the year. At some point, the Congress is going to have to decide what to do with the Bush tax cuts, especially for the upper-income people. And I know that very upper-income people pay a lot of the taxes. We all know that. Is it your party's position right now, Congressman Pence, that you're going to try to keep the Bush tax cuts for the very wealthy, even at the time you're saying no extensive unemployment, and even though both factors could lead to a higher deficit, you're going to lean towards keeping those tax cuts for the rich, but lean hard against extending unemployment benefits. You're comfortable fighting this next election on that line, keeping the Bush tax cuts for the rich, avoiding extending unemployment benefits for the working poor. You're comfortable fighting this election on that issue?
Well, no, I'm comfortable fighting this election on being the party that wants to pay for unemployment benefits by making choices and different priorities. Absolutely. Let me be as clear as a bell on hardball. House Republicans are determined to fight and to oppose the largest tax increase in American history with everything we got. I don't know anybody back in Indiana or anywhere across the country that thinks allowing the largest tax increase in history to take effect in January it makes any sense in getting this economy moving again.
Okay, these are great rhetoric, and I understand the business everybody's in. We're in journalism, too. We like hyped-up words, too. But you use words like steroids and largest tax cuts in history. But the bottom line is your party position going into this election is no extensive unemployment benefits unless cuts are made elsewhere, and yet you will not stop in other words, you will continue the Bush tax cuts for the very wealthy at the cost of a higher deficit. That's fair enough, isn't it?
I don't know anybody who thinks that they pay too little in taxes. I don't know anybody who thinks that by raising taxes in January, you're going to create jobs. I mean, come on, Chris. This is really.
You got me there. Nobody wants to pay taxes. You won. Let me ask you this. What's the unemployment?
The administration may think that raising taxes in January is a pathway toward prosperity, but I would venture to guess almost every American knows you don't raise taxes during a recession.
Okay, well, the guy making $10 million a year is going to keep his tax cut, and the guy who's open to get unemployment comp this week isn't going to get it because of the Republican leadership. I understand that's your position. What's the unemployment rate in Indiana right now, sir?
It's banging right up to 10%. It's worse in some counties in my district.
And you're willing to face it. It's 10% as of the last couple of months. Are you willing to face that unemployment rate and still say no to the people in unemployment comp, even though they paid into it?
I am willing to stand up for every American, to help Americans at the point of the need, and also to say that I want to be a part of leadership in Washington, D.C. that's willing to make the hard choices, to put a priority on some spending over others. Look, the American people want to help people at the point of the need. They want to see us pursuing policies that will create jobs. But, Chris, I got to tell you, maybe you can hear it out there on the West Coast. Back home in Indiana at a county fair on Friday night, all I heard about was, when are you people going to get serious about getting spending under control?
I think the unemployment rate's even worse out here. Thank you very much. And keep coming back to hardball. Congressman Mike Pence, number 3 Republican leader in the House. Up next, in the wake of the September 11th attacks, the federal government built up its national security and intelligence bureaucracy. But did it make us safer? That's the problem. We're so complex. It's so difficult to manage. One has to wonder whether we're getting the job done of protecting us and keeping us safe. We got a huge story coming up here thanks to Dana Priest, who wrote the big story for the Washington Post. She's coming here next. You got to hear this one. This is Hardball, only on MSNBC.